Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the deep psychological and frankly philosophical roots of why we care so much about what other people think. You know that feeling, walking into a room and just getting hit with this massive wave of self-consciousness? Well, we're going to break down exactly why that happens. We'll look at it through the lenses of cognitive psychology, sociology, and existential philosophy. And don't worry, we're not just going to leave you hanging. We'll equip you with some proven tools to actually reclaim your mental freedom. Let's get into it. Let's start with a feeling pretty much all of us know way too well. It's that uncomfortable, almost paralyzing sense that you are the absolute center of everyone's critical attention. I mean, whether you tripped on the sidewalk, maybe mispronounced a word in a meeting, wore a shirt that you suddenly realize is way too loud, or, my personal favorite, enthusiastically waved at a stranger who was actually waving to the person right behind you, your brain immediately screams that everyone saw it, everyone is judging you for it, and absolutely no one will ever forget it. Okay, so to tackle this, let's anchor ourselves in a truly liberating truth. We constantly, and I mean constantly, overestimate our own salience. Basically, we think we're the main character in everyone else's movie. And it makes sense, right? We are inherently the center of our own universe, so we process every single little event from a highly self-focused perspective. But here is the reality check. Everyone else is doing the exact same thing. They're the center of their own worlds, which means they are paying way less attention to you than your anxiety is telling you. This phenomenon actually has a name. It's called the spotlight effect. Coined by researchers like Thomas Gilovich, it's heavily driven by an internal cognitive process called anchoring and adjustment. See, we use our own internal anxiety as a starting point, an anchor. Then we just fail to sufficiently adjust for the wild fact that other people don't actually have access to our internal feelings. We incorrectly assume onlookers can see exactly how anxious or embarrassed we feel on the inside, and we end up projecting this massive imaginary spotlight right onto ourselves. There's a study that brilliantly illustrates just how powerful this is. In a really famous 1980 experiment by Kleck and Strenta, volunteers were given makeup to simulate a prominent facial scar. They looked in a mirror, saw the scar, and then, right before going to talk to a stranger, the makeup artist applied a moisturizer. But here's the kicker. That moisturizer secretly removed the scar completely. The volunteers went into the conversation totally barefaced, yet when they came back, they reported that the other person was acting distant, tense, and patronizing, all because of the scar. So the intense social judgment they felt, completely 100% self-generated by their own self-consciousness. Crazy, right? But you know, sometimes this intense focus on what others think isn't just a simple cognitive glitch. It actually goes much deeper. When this fear of judgment stems from unpredictable or high-stress environments in childhood, it can evolve into a trauma response known as fawning. You've probably heard of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Well, fawning sits right alongside them. It's a subconscious survival strategy where someone tries to appease others just to avoid conflict and secure their own emotional safety. Understanding this is absolutely crucial because it strips the shame right out of people-pleasing. It's a survival mechanism, guys, not a weakness. And fawning isn't just about being a nice person. It's an automatic strategy that comes with some really heavy hidden costs. People who fawn deal with chronic guilt over simply saying no. They constantly over-apologize, and they have an incredibly difficult time setting even basic boundaries. Ultimately, they adopt so much to the perceived needs and judgments of other people that they risk losing their own sense of identity entirely, all just to keep the peace. Okay, let's move into our first major section here, the macro view, also known as the sociological mirror. So, now that we've looked at the psychology, let's zoom out a bit. Let's look at the sociological level and see how society literally builds our self-image from the ground up. Way back in 1902, sociologist Charles Horton Cooley coined this fascinating concept called the looking glass self. He proposed a three-step process showing that our identity is completely entangled with our imagination of how others judge us. Step 1, we imagine how we appear to someone else. Step 2, we imagine what their judgment of that appearance is. And step 3, we experience an emotional reaction. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's shame, based entirely on that imagined judgment. Basically, we're using social interaction as a psychological mirror to build our own self-esteem. What this actually means is that our ego self is, well, a false facade. It's a social mask scripted by the demands and perceived judgments of everyone else around us, completely divorced from our authentic inner nature. We get so caught up in the exterior landscape, constantly seeking approval to feed that ego, that we lose sight of our interior landscape, where our true, essential self actually lives. That brings us to section 2, Sartre and the gaze, or what we can call existential surveillance. Let's take a slight detour into the philosophical realm and see how this builds into a genuine existential crisis. While sociology says others give us our identity through a mirror, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, well, he took a much darker view. He argued that the gaze of the other actually objectifies us and strips away our personal freedom. Think about it. When you're alone, you're the master of your universe. But the exact moment someone else looks at you, boom, you suddenly realize you are just an object in their universe. Sartre realized that whenever we are looked at, this invisible power dynamic is instantly created. The gaze is literally a way of exercising power. It forces you to see yourself from the outside, which alienates you from your own subjective freedom. You stop acting purely for yourself, and you start acting in response to the surveillance of the other. So big question here. If we're trapped by the spotlight, the mirror, and this heavy existential gaze, how do we reclaim our minds? How do we actually break the glass and step back into our own freedom? Well, this is exactly where clinical psychology steps in to give us a roadmap, which perfectly tees up Section 3, Mastery, and how we go about rewiring the anxious mind. Take a look at this graphic. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, maps out the exact cycle that keeps us trapped. Notice how the whole thing kicks off with negative expectations. We go into a social situation already assuming the absolute worst. This creates apprehension, which then laser focuses our attention strictly on finding failures. And, because we're looking so hard for errors, of course we find them. That spikes our anxiety, leading us to perceive the entire interaction as a huge failure, which, you guessed it, perfectly confirms our initial negative expectations. It is a flawless, self-perpetuating loop. The really crucial point here is that when you're in this state, a tiny, minor mistake, like stumbling over a word or breaking a sweat, gets massively amplified by what CBT calls amplifying cognitions. Through this sort of twisted psychological magnifying glass, a tiny error is suddenly equated with absolute, catastrophic failure. Just being a little bit different feels like total rejection. The anxiety itself becomes proof in your mind that you are somehow defective, leading to some really deep shame. But please remember this, your brain tricking you like this is a common, well-documented phenomenon. You are not broken. Now, to survive this terrifying cycle, we naturally adopt what therapists call safety behaviors. This could be clenching your hands tightly to hide a tremble, gripping a drink at a party just so you look natural, or maybe completely avoiding eye contact so you don't freeze up. But here is the massive catch, and this is so important. These behaviors actually lock in your anxiety. They create the illusion of a lucky escape. You leave the party thinking, man, I only survived that because I held my drink the whole time. And because of that logic, these behaviors actively prevent you from learning that you would have been perfectly fine without them. Take a second right now and think about it. What are your go-to safety behaviors? Are you actively preventing yourself from realizing you'd be totally fine without them? CBT actually empowers you to break the glass by deliberately dropping those safety behaviors. You literally have to enter the social situation, let your hands hang loose, make that eye contact, and actively challenge those cognitive distortions. By doing this, you're giving your brain the chance to gather real evidence and compare it. Slowly, you begin to realize that your intense subjective feeling of anxiety does not reflect your actual objective social performance. You are doing so much better than your anxious brain is telling you. Moving to our final section, the Stoic Shield and the practice of internalizing worth. Alongside these highly effective clinical tools we just talked about, we can also pick up a philosophical shield to protect our newfound freedom. Stoicism. Stoicism teaches us to stop caring about what other people think by radically internalizing our self-worth. Think about it. We've spent our whole lives disapproving of ourselves based on imagined external judgments, and honestly, it hasn't worked out too well, has it? The Stoic approach, which is actually echoed perfectly in modern psychology, is to realize that true self-approval comes solely from self-acceptance. It is this deep, unshakable recognition that your essential nature is enough. You are enough, exactly as you are. And embracing that truth completely removes the need to go out chasing external validation. Once you realize the spotlight is an illusion, the mirror is just a distortion, and the gaze only holds the power you actively give it, you are finally free. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I want to leave you with this final thought to carry with you as you step out of the spotlight and back into your own life. If our identity has only been a reflection in the social mirror, what incredible things could you accomplish when you finally decide to shatter the glass?